Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Premium. I'm Peter Martin. Hugh, McDonald and Alison McConnell are with me here in the studio. Thank you so much to you for subscribing to PLZ Soccer and, of course, downloading our podcast as well, which is proving ever so popular. There's so much more to offer you all the way through this season. Thank you for your support last season, and hopefully we'll give you enough topics to get your teeth into, argue with us, agree, disagree. That's what it's all about, especially the Journos, where we take a look at football, not only domestically, but slightly further afield, and deal with some topics that can at times be a little touchy on the nerve. But today, of course, the big thing, Hugh, it was a difficult time for me because obviously when I looked at the BBC graphics on the game, Rangers against Victoria Pilsen, it said, Rangers versus PLZ. So when I realised they were really toiling, I thought I'll put Ali on up front, but she'd pulled her hamstring, and I'm not happy with your fitness at the moment. I don't think you've come back from pre-season in the way you should.
Oh, come on, I got enough running around.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of people who were, sending me saying, "Do you think your team will get the win tonight?" But nevertheless, interestingly enough, you did mention there something which I wonder about with managers. It's not so much naivety, maybe it's bravado, and maybe he deserves a pat on the back, Russell Martin, for basically slaughtering his players. Some people say, well, wait a minute, you've gone a bit early, day one. Could some players give you a negative reaction to that and say, well, we'll be downing tools, we'll not be playing for you, you're going to slaughter us. But I, on the other hand, flipped it and thought, well, good on you.
I think you had to do it, and I'll tell you why. The narrative coming out of the previous managers, except for to a certain extent Barry, who was in for just a few months and could be a wee bit more forceful about the players. Narrative's always been in press conferences after terrible insipid performances to take some kind of consolation in statistics, or we had so many shots on target, and I think Russell Martin knew that there's certain problems here, and if he's going to get out them, he's got to confront them face on, and he can't kid on the support. He can't say to the support, listen, against Motherwell maybe we should have had a penalty, or we were 1-0 up and missed a good chance, or whatever. He's got to come out and just say, listen, I know what you saw and I saw it too. The big problem for him going forward is that, does he keep them on board? But he backed it up with his selection. He went all the way with it. He said no. So interesting times. I mean, because this is a situation, as they always say, developing story.
Yeah, and again, but we're forever looking for that line that suddenly can make a sub editor's day. But drop their ego was damning. And when you looked, you thought to yourself, well, wait a minute. Who's not going to play against Pilsen? And you looked at Tavernier and you looked at Raskin and thought, well, listen, there's a direct hit.
Absolutely, and I think I was on the fence on Saturday night. I was at Fir Park on Saturday when he came out. Obviously, we're all in the media room. You hear the TV interview, it's playing above, and right away you hear the silence in the room. You just know it's a really strong line. Came in and was equally as forcible with us when in the broadcast and written interviews. And I was on the fence. I thought, I don't know if you've just gone too early, given the fact that you've got a game on Tuesday night. You've still got a couple of weeks before the transfer window, a few big games before then, and you might need a tune out of the same players that you're criticising. However, what I thought was he backed it up. When you then saw the team sheet last night, you think, well, it's not just empty rhetoric. You've now gone, you've made the changes. Not just did you make the changes, but you actually got the reaction you wanted. I thought it was a very aggressive performance from Rangers last night. I thought they were full of energy, full of running, full of attitude, full of, there was so much good about that performance. And that's, you can maybe say that they're not against the best quality of opposition. I think that's by the by. I think he got the performance and the approach that he wanted. I thought they were full of energy last night. They could have won by a more comfortable margin, and I think what you've seen now across the last 72 hours or whatever it is, it's not going to just be talk. He's already put a line down and said, if you're not going to buy into what I'm doing, you're not going to be here.
Yeah, the other thing about it, which might work really in his favour, Now, and sometimes you can be lucky with these things, there's an interview with Philippe Clement saying basically, you know, he had to deal with in his 16 months in charge massive turmoil in the boardroom, which didn't help his case.
It didn't. It didn't help his case, but he also, and it's very difficult for any person, but you've got to look at yourself, and Philippe contributed to his own situation, and one of the ways he contributed was that hiding behind stats, instead of coming out and supporters saying, listen, we know it's not good enough, we've got another transfer window, blah, blah, blah. I was talking about in the interview needing 4 or 5 transfer windows to get it right. I mean, you had to communicate with the fans just what's going on. The interesting thing, I thought Martin, the real line in the Russell Martin thing, I know the big line was the egos and things like that. The interesting line for me going forward is when he said, listen, we've only had one bid and it's for Dessers.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting because what that means is that he has, to a certain extent, a problem in that normally you would say, right, particularly after last night, get rid of the captain, get rid of Raskin, just get rid of them. I don't fancy them, get rid of them. But if there's no bids for them, that makes it difficult. And the reason, there'll be interest around these players, don't get me wrong, the reason is this historical thing. People at Rangers are in good money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the other thing about it, which is difficult for them as well, and you can have what I would call, how can I put this without being too critical on a Journos programme, but you can have people who would write anything a club tells them to write, who would try and punt certain players and increase, you know, what they think the standard of that player is. Sometimes, you know, I think scouts are not fooled by it, and the fact that there's only one player that has gained any interest is because, quite simply, Dessers scored 29 goals last season. So that's why people are interested in the goal scorer. You know, the fact that he's not rated even on home soil here by a lot of Rangers fans is because of the 29 goals. He missed that many chances. But the point here is, and this goes back to what previous directors have been saying and in discussions with them, the recruitment's been so woeful that the standard of player that they've recruited, they do have a fault line, which is quite simply this constant inability to beat teams that are considered lesser than them, and that they came a cropper in the domestic scene with that. But the recruitment's so poor that no club wants to buy the standard of player that they have, and that standard of player has quite simply been a group of players that have failed regularly. What I saw from the team that Russell Martin is slowly but surely wanting to put together is I saw in one game just the embryonic stages of urgency, of quick passing, of Gassama, don't take 5 touches when one will do.
Well, I think the front three looked really good. I've always been, I wouldn't say a huge supporter of Dessers, but I always wondered, I mean, yes, Dessers should have scored 50 goals last year, right, with the chances he got. If he'd scored 50 goals, he'd have been Harry Kane rather than Cyril Dessers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're buying in the market where you've got to say, right, okay, he's missing a few chances, but we're going for X million, probably get our money back on him. And you know what? Domestically, that's all. He'll miss sitters, he'll miss the odd one.
Yeah.
But that's why he's isn't he? He doesn't want to think too much. But I thought the front three were terrific last night. I mean, I thought
2 proper widemen.
Exactly. Once you've got 2 guys that have got a bit of pace about them, got a bit of, I think the 2 of them showed a bit of confidence as well to go and take on.
And what you think, just in the door, just off the plane and straight in.
Straight in, and then he wanted to go at the guys, and I love that in a winger. Just love a winger that, I mean, they're going to lose the ball now and again, but, and I thought for the first time, you know, and it's so early as well, that his system, you could see what he was trying to do. You could see what he was trying to do in midfield. Cameron had a terrific game for him as well. You know, we're not going to talk about him as the next Zidane or anything like that, but we've got to talk him up as far as he's a young Scottish player that's played in the Champions League qualifier and looked very, very comfortable there.
Yeah, absolutely. If anything, you know, and you know, we again, you know, sometimes the naivety of a young man like that want to impress. There was a danger that people could have bludgeoned them before he even jumped onto the park against Victoria Pilsen with his line about his previous club.
I think they were all in Dundee. I think they were all, I think he's just guilty of, it's not even guilty, you're 22, he is naive. It's not being guilty of naivety. He was naive in what he said when he referenced Dundee as a small club. But I have a huge amount of sympathy for how that has been perceived and how he said it, because I think his intent there was to talk up Rangers and talk up the jump that you experience when you go from a club like Dundee to Rangers, and how different everything is, and the intensity, not just on the pitch or at training, but the intensity, as this interview will show, of every single word uttered will be poured on, the microscopic scrutiny and everything, how you conduct yourself, what you say, your body language, your tone, everything. If you didn't know now before, he will know now. And in some ways, it's not great news for us, because it makes people naturally cagey and very, very wary of revealing anything other than very perfunctory answers. But I thought he was terrific last night. I really did. I thought he was fantastic. I think you can see, just for coaches, I think what you're seeing in the park is a boy willing to work his socks off, do what you're asking him. No ego, almost. It was like, I'll go fulfil instructions. I thought he'd done a power of running last night. I thought he was always trying to make himself available. And for a boy who's not got any experience at that level, first time going into a European qualifier, I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, you're talking about it makes it difficult for all of us in the press, is, listen, the whole game now is sanitised to the point where you are struggling to get somebody who even can display their personality, never mind scratch the surface of them. It's more and more difficult now with the way the whole PR machine is working to get any kind of insight. I think over the last 5 or 6 years, Hugh, there's more of a detachment on getting a real understanding of what people are all about, knowing anything about them. I think there's a greater distance, not just with the homegrown players, but when the foreign players come in, there's no real sense of who they are, what makes them tick, personality-wise. 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, you had a flavour of a Brian Laudrup, you had a flavour of a Lubomir Moravcik, you had interviews that gave you a little insight. Now it's becoming more and more sanitised, more and more controlled.
Absolutely. I mean, before I came into the writing side of sports journalism, about the early 2000s, I was obviously on the desk in the Herald, and I went to the Hall of Fame dinner, and I had no relationship with any footballer at that time, and I was sitting at the table with likes yourself and Hugh Keevins and Roger Bailey and Hugh McIlvanney and Glenn Gibbons, and who knew all these players, and there was a steady stream of people walking to this table, and it was Dave Mackay, it was John Gregg, it was Billy McNeil, it was Tommy Gemmell, it was Johnny Giles. They were coming to this table to talk to the journalists. They were friendly with the journalists. There was a relationship then. And even then, and this is 20 years ago, I went, Wayne Rooney won't do, see when Wayne Rooney's 60 and 70, he won't do that.
Yeah.
Cristiano Ronaldo won't do that. And now the relationship between, and it's significant. People say, well, how significant is it? I think it's significant in that it's an example of the fissure between footballers and the general public. Yeah. It's an example. Yeah. The press was somewhere in between, and it's a fissure between that. I mean, because I always remember talking to Tommy Gemmell, and he was talking about how after he signed with Celtic, him and Jimmy Johnston got on the bus back to Lanarkshire with their respective dads.
Their lives weren't so different from what they are now. Now it's like superstars.
Like, what?
But Jim Baxter and Jimmy Johnson would say, right, I'll meet you up the pub. Although it's still, according to some of the pictures I saw in the last few days in the papers, Fergus McCann get the train back with his,
God bless
partner.
Ferguson.
And I thought to myself, just the bonnet on, get the train, saved a few quid, go wherever he goes and roll on. The difference is...
Walked out to Celtic Park.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not complaining about, woe are we in this group of people who earn a living from trying to engage and tell stories and get under the skin of people. But you know, you only have to look at, you referenced it there, and this is probably giving people who listen to this show and watch this show a little insight into the friendships you can build up, the relationships, the respect that you get is, you know, when I hosted the PFA for 20 years, the relationship was that I knew everything about them and they knew I knew everything about them. and I would, my attitude to it was, and this is where, I remember one of the guys from the FA of Ireland come out and he says, bloody hell, he says, I love this PFA Awards, he says, because there's respect, they're celebrating what they've achieved, and then you leather them. And he said, and it's a great bit of fun. He says, but the players love it because they like the dressing room humour. He said, you go to the PFA Awards in England, and this is what we're talking about with gaps, because they're living a completely different life. All they get is somebody going, this is magnificent for you, unbelievable, there's your award. A couple of words of, I'd like to thank the boss and the players, and then boom, they're off the stage, and it's one of the dullest nights ever. It's, you know, that's the change of it all, you know.
It's so different. I think the world has changed and the industry has changed so beyond all recognition. So you think now you have a PR machine at every club that you wouldn't have had going back in the day. Clubs control every message that's coming out of players because you want to project a particular image and everything around it. You also now have smartphones where everything that we do, so many of us are recording things, and it is very easy to take a line out of context and put it out, and a narrative builds up that's maybe not entirely reflective of the spirit with which something was said. Now, we're going to go back to Lennon Miller last season when he came out and said, I want to be the best. Like, I want to come in here and be the best. Now, that caused a huge, it caused a big reaction because we amplify it rightly. And then, of course, you've got the Scotland assistant manager coming out and saying, oh, I feel as though I've got to dampen down in any arrogance or cockiness. Anyone that knows that boy would say there was no intent there whatsoever. There was nothing that he said.
Scottish thing, that though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, don't get above your station too quickly. And
is arrogance or confidence a sin in this country?
I think it's a basis. If Lennon Miller wants to be anything, he needs that. He has to believe that.
What I mean is that story in itself. Like, there would be people on the outside thinking that doesn't reflect well on him. And what I mean by saying something's not necessarily in the spirit of how it was presented, that was just a boy saying, I want to fulfil my potential. I want to go as far as I can. I want to go. There's no one who's watched that boy come up would say, oh, he's got a big hit for himself, or he's just not that kind of kid at all.
Yeah.
So what I mean is that things can be misrepresented, I think, and it does make then people naturally cautious when you go into an interview again, that you think, I don't want to be seen as something that I'm not, or I don't want to find myself in the eye of this kind of media storm, or I want to be the focal point of a story. I just want to play football. I'll come in and I'll speak to you, but I really don't want to find myself all over back pages or all over Twitter or all over the internet now with something taken out of context.
Well, it brings me back to Lyle Cameron, who fits into that, a young boy who just wants to do his absolute best for his new team, which is fine. Didn't mean any kind of, derogatory statement towards Dundee. It was a reflection of the bigger club that he joined, which you highlighted. But it brings me back to the point which was not lost, which was Russell Martin basically saying, listen, you don't want to play for Rangers, you don't want to do what I want to do, you won't be playing. And and with that in mind, suddenly, and I think that we've got to, again, put a dampener on it, because it's Victoria Pilsen that Rangers had to do a professional job on, and boy did they do it, and scored some really good goals. Desser's creating one for Gassam I thought was lovely.
Beautiful, isn't it?
So I think Rangers fans will look at it and think, great, thoroughly enjoyed the way they played, little triangles, people harried, pressed, good effort. Well deserving of, instead of the boos at the end of the game, it was like, well done, excellent. The flip side of that is, and I think they will go through, is, go and play in the Czech Republic, finish off the job, maybe take a draw, and then get ready for the next one, which is, of course, against Club Brugge or Salzburg. And suddenly, the whole landscape could change for Russell Martin if they could somehow lock what I call that initial. People say it's 40 million, but it's an initial 40 million, and the riches after that with merchandise, with ticket sales and everything, is close to 60 million.
I mean, it's huge. I mean, there's a really persuasive case that the most important title to win in recent years was the one before last, because it gave Celtic 60 million and Rangers, I think, what was it, in the 20s they got. So it changes landscapes dramatically, and it changes very quickly, because if Rangers and Celtic were to get into the Champions League this year, it creates a situation where they're not odds on to get into it, you know, from here on in. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be hugely difficult. Both clubs, even the champions of Scotland, will go in next year at the spot that Rangers started in this year.
Yes.
You know, so it's going to become very, very difficult. I mean, clubs were budgeting, all right, if we're champions, we'll get into the Champions League maybe once out of five, twice out of five, instead of the automatic goal. So it's huge for Rangers.
But again, and I'm going to hammer the other clubs, it's quite simply down to the fact that Rangers have been flying the flag. Celtic laterally have slowly but surely started to pitch in with points. The international side as well. But the other clubs, their record is abysmal.
His record is awful. I mean, there's so much wrong with other clubs. Not only the way the other clubs have been run for years has been very, very poor. I mean, the recruitment has been poor. There seems to have been no strategy in recruitment. You know, if you think about how many players have those big clubs sold on that they've produced, even when you go to Aberdeen, when you look at the ones that they have sold on, it's been ones that have recruited, even in the state of Lewis Ferguson. Lewis Ferguson, of course, had been at Rangers, Hamilton, and you know, before that, even with Miofsky was a buy-in, a great piece of recruitment. So now what, and this is the interesting thing I think about Scottish football this season, is that there is now this story around it, this culture around it, where you can see there's like what they used to call intellectual capital around the clubs. You can see whether it works or not. There's people that come in with strategy, you know, Bloom at Hearts. I mean, I think the Hibs thing is turned around in a year. You can actually say, oh, I know where they're going now. I mean, and they've sold a player for more than $1 million. And that's the way it's got to go. That's the way it's got to go. These clubs will have to create players, create talent, send them on, and perform at a decent level in Europe.
And this brings me nicely to, it's almost as if we've transitioned right into it, but thank you for that, Hugh, is the fact that when we talk about people who make comments that are taken out of context, some of the comments this week have not been taken out of context, and Tony Bloom is one of them. If I'm Derek McInnes, I am saying to my players after the game against Aberdeen, listen, I'm just going to get into a darkened room and I'm going to scalp my head off the wall, because Tony Bloom has come out in the interview and said, you know, the days of Celtic and Rangers dominating are over, we're coming, and you know, this season we'd like to challenge Celtic for the title. Now, I'm just going to give you my take on it, Alison, which is quite simply, roll on, let's go, let's have that arrogance, let's have that confidence in it. Yes, absolutely. Now, I would say to a lot of people who may be getting overexcited about his comments, Jamestown analytics and the Moneyball process of analysing players it's not the be-all and end-all. Lots of teams work out a certain style of recruitment to it. The one thing that I think is in his favour, and this is where I think Hearts fans should get excited, yes, you want to be confident about it. There is evidence that he's managed to, whatever he's doing with Jamestown Analytics and whatever his process and strategy is, it worked at Union Saint-Gilloise. And, you know, they had a quarter of the budget of Bruges and have won the title for the first time in 90 years. And I think Hearts fans are looking and thinking, bloody hell, if he could do that, he could do it there. So there's a wee bit of excitement. I wouldn't like it to go mental, but I looked at Hearts against Aberdeen and boy, were they on it. They were on it because the team reflected Derek's attitude and there was a wee bit of quality in there.
Absolutely. And I thought Aberdeen came out, actually, there was a wee bit in the second half where you thought Aberdeen might come back into it and Hearts get that second goal. I thought they were excellent. I thought they were impressive. I thought you could see the system, you could see the identity within the team right away. You know exactly how they're going to play, how they're going to set up. You could feel the energy in the stadium. You could feel the buy-in, the optimism, the here's this guy come in with a transfer recruitment strategy, here's this very bold approach to where we want to be, the direction of travel that we want to go in. Here's a manager that we think can fulfil it. We've got a couple of players. Lauren Shanklin I thought he looked leaner. I thought he looked fitter, sharper. Scored a fantastic goal. Obviously, VAR ruled it off in the build-up. But I thought I think Hearts will be a good watch this season. I think they'll be fun to watch. I think they look as though they've got a lot of aggression about them. I think they're a team that are going to be built to reflect Derek McInnes's style of management and coaching. I think they will definitely challenge for third. I think it's too early to say that they'll split Celtic and Rangers. I don't see it over the course of the campaign. I would expect them to be up there, probably about third, certainly challenging for third. In the long term, the ambition, I think, of challenging for a title, it does feel fanciful. I think you look at it and you think of the resources that Celtic and Rangers have, and it does seem as though it's hugely unlikely to ever happen. No one's done it since, 1985?
Yeah.
You think, can it happen? But if you're a Hearts supporter, it's exactly what you want to hear. You want to hear that ambition. You want to say, and the fact that there is a reference point to go back and say, well, it's not just pie in the sky. This is how the approach worked. I think it's exciting. I think it's what you want to hear. And I think any team that comes up a level to challenge Celtic and Rangers, a one-horse race for a title is no good for anyone. You want the league to be competitive. You want teams to be able to challenge, to be able to take points off. You want it to be fraught for Celtic going to Tynecastle, for Rangers going to Tynecastle. It helps the league, helps the standard of the league, it helps the standard of players. Whether or not there's a title delivered across the last decade, I would have to say I'd be hugely dubious. It's a laudable ambition, though.
I think it's to be applauded. I hope they're able to implement the strategy continually and give them more players, because that's the key to it. The key to it is getting players who... It's something that I think is abundantly clear, where the analytics of it is quite simply, if you buy this player at this level for this money, his record of getting crosses into the box is this. Here's the percentage. Here's where he runs. Here's his, his attitude to pre-season and in training, how long he lasts. They analyse everything, and here's the type of goals he's scoring. So suddenly, the only thing that Jamestown Analytics will not be able to get a hold on, quite simply, Hugh, is that man-to-man, person-to-person, what kind of character is he under pressure? That's where you still get that man management, where somebody says, you've been criticised, how are you reacting to it? Are you sulking? Can I lift you up? Do you need an arm round you? Do you need a rollicking at half-time? Do you know that part of it? That part will never be lost from a manager.
No, and there's also, I think as well, is sometimes there is a thing in a manager's eye, and I know analytics, etc. But your great hero, Kenny Dalglish, he was always sort of actually slightly derided as a coach. Oh, he's not a coach, he's a manager, he leaves the coaching to this, or he's not this, and he's that. Kenny Dalglish's eye for a player was unbelievable. I always remember when Blackburn won the league, Dalglish had a lot of money to spend when Blackburn won the league, but how he spent it.
Yeah. And
then when he left, not only did he give Blackburn the league, but the fees that he'd paid for the players that he'd bought were 5-6 times. He paid 3 million for Shearer, 16 million away, a couple of million for Sutton, 12 million up, 12. There are people. And you'll not teach it in any university course, and I honestly would think that Dalglish was one of them. If you look back at his signings, Dalglish signed John Barnes, and everybody goes, oh my goodness, John Barnes, anybody could sign him. Not at Liverpool at the time, you wouldn't.
No, he wasn't what they would consider a Liverpool player.
He wasn't a Liverpool player.
Yeah.
So there is the element in football, because it's a human construct, there is that element of the eye, and there's definitely the element of the manager and players playing for the manager. I think that's important.
Yeah, and the other thing about it, which I say to people now, for Celtic fans, winning 13 of the last 14 seasons title is, for them, great. From a journalistic point of view, I look at it and I get very bored with the whole thing, and that's why I love English football. I love English football because of the competitive nature of it, because of that uncertainty at times. You do get dynasties. You do get a Man United, you do get a Man City, you do get a Chelsea. And, you know, to a lesser extent at the moment, you know, Liverpool have upset the apple cart, and you used to have an Arsenal in there. But that's 4 or 5 teams that I'm mentioning. The anomaly is Leicester, I accept out of it.
We also spent a lot of money.
Exactly, but you couldn't get that now. You couldn't get a Leicester up here. But what I think we can get, and this is where I hope we start to see the shoots of it, is if Hearts can be entertaining, then get momentum, then keep it going within 5 points all the way through to December, Hugh, it keeps us all happy. It keeps us all interested, rather than this chasm where Celtic have got 20 points of a difference. They're way ahead of Rangers, then they're even further ahead of the team in third. And I always say to people, and I make no bones about saying it at the time, when I was a kid, you know, with my mates going to watch Celtic, we used to go up to Dundee and Aberdeen, and we'd look at each other and we'd go, it'd be great if we got a draw up here, because Dundee United and Aberdeen would spank you. They could easily beat you on any given day. Fergie's team, more often than not, had that about them. They'd grit, but they had class players, and they could win games. And I look back to, you alluded to 1985 Aberdeen, the last team to win a top flight in Scotland, which is a damning indictment of our system as it stands. But the last team, Alex Smith's Aberdeen side came within a cat's whisker of doing it in 1989-90. But in 86, it was the first day, I'll never forget it, first day I moved into a flat in Edinburgh. And I give you the team of Hearts in 86. Henry Smith in goal. Sandy Jardine was in a kind of a sweeper role, but sometimes he played alongside Craig Levein, Roddy McDonald. The fullbacks are Walter Kidd and Brian Whittaker. Then you have a midfield with John Colquhoun, Gary Mackay, Kenny Black, maybe sometimes Neil Berry. And then up front, the strike force was Sandy Clark and John Robertson. I mean, just a great team of experience, of youth, of a striker who could score goals for fun. And they were in the same boat as Aberdeen. Win at Dundee, you've won the league. And sadly for them, blew it.
And the cup final as well. They could have had a double.
And the cup final lost 3-0 to Aberdeen.
Yeah, I mean, it shows you how far it's actually economics of the game has changed. I always say, you know, people talk about. I always say the best team I ever saw not to win the league was not that Hearts team. It was actually the Hibs team of the early 70s, which I could give you off the top of my head as well. You know. But I'll just talk about the highlights in that team being, you know, Stanton and Edwards, Brownlee and Blackley. I mean, there's 4 for Gordon and Jimmy O'Rourke, you know, players like that. But it was economics. The clubs could keep them then. I mean, Aberdeen could keep Miller and McLeish because they were on X amount. They might be, you know, if they were on 500, 600, maybe Tottenham were offering them 900, 1,000, and we're going, well, you know, I've got my pub, my businesses up there. Do I want to go down to London and uproot my whole family for that? Instead of now where if you're a top player at Aberdeen, you're maybe on 3,000. And if you go to the Premier League, even as a mediocre player in the Premier League, you're talking about 70 to 80,000. I mean, that's a no-brainer now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not just happening to players at that level. It's happening to players coming through. Every club in Scotland can tell you a story, from St Johnstone to Dundee United to wherever you want to talk, Celtic, Rangers, of kids now going down to England at 15 and 16.
For exactly the same reasons.
And for exactly the same reasons, just money.
Yeah.
We've got famous ones like Doak, who's going to be subject to 20-25 million pound bids, where he's got maybe 10 Liverpool appearances, etc. So we've got so many, and it's just football clubs in Scotland. It's very easy to say they've just got to be a bit smarter, and it's. By the way, I've not got the answers for it, you know. But even bringing players through is not going to be enough, because if they bring them through, they're going to go. So it's got to be, they've got to have maybe perhaps a better pathway for some players. They've got to have a better liaison with players to say, right, and it's going to be very difficult. I mean, imagine Doak. you go to Dock, you can stay here. Dock played in a Rangers Celtic game. You know, it's not as if Celtic didn't give him a chance. I mean, they knew, Celtic knew he was going and said, listen, this is how much we rate you. You're 16, okay. It was dead rubberish, but we're putting you on. And so he was getting that. But I mean, I don't know Doak or his family, but if you say to Doak, well, it's actually Jurgen Klopp's in for you, and we're going to give you money that will change your life, and it's Liverpool, it's very hard to turn down.
Yeah, the other thing about it as well, which is quite interesting, and I remember I was talking about Aberdeen, but in Dundee United, and you know because you've been with us at PLZ since the start, is quite simply when I used to get Dundee United players of Jim McLean's vintage in, they also mentioned the fact that they had a structure where the basic was so...
25-year contract.
Yeah, well, not just the contract, Ali, but the basic wage was so poor. He says, but what happened was he had put together an incentive that if you won a game, you get a huge bonus. And that bonus started to roll on, the more consecutive. He says, so suddenly we've thumped 6, 7 teams in a row, and and we've got this big money. And I just wonder if clubs might look at that incentivising, again, that brings, gets the best out. Maybe that's the way that you look at it in Scottish football for some teams. If you're on a run, we're going to increase your bonus. I don't know if there's enough finance to be able to do that, but nevertheless.
Also as well, I think it's a hard sell. If you're trying to entice players to a club, that's a really hard sell.
I don't mean the basic wage, I mean the incentive of saying, listen, by the way, here's your basic wage, and as Hugh mentioned, sometimes
I think it's different because then you would have still had a real hunger, because that basic wage would be much the equivalent of what what you're earning in a normal job. It wouldn't be so far above, whereas now even your base rate would be significantly higher than what anyone is earning in a regular 9-to-5 kind of job. So you don't have that same financial need to go and do it. I get what you're saying. I think clubs you still have win bonuses, you'll still have European bonuses, goal for strikers, you score X amount of goals, you have so much, you still have all those things inbuilt in contracts, and I think you still have them for young players coming through. If you make the first team, you're getting X amount. If you make if you actually go on, you get X amount. I think you still have those incentives. I just think it's a very different economic world that football operates in now, that would transfer into a current modern day entity. Interestingly
enough, in 85-86, it transformed Celtic because Roy Aitken went to the board and said, by the way, I've just spoken to Graham Souness and all their players are on this, this and this. And if we've just won the league, then we want a significant rise in the basic wage for everybody. And, and Celtic had to respond.
And then the real explosion came, the one that blew Dundee United out the water, was that the contract system changed. It wasn't, the clubs didn't retain your registration after your contract ended. So as soon as your contract was running down, you could move and you talk about it. And that's an interesting situation. In the modern day game, it's a hugely interesting situation now because, behind all the furore about, for example, Rangers at the moment, Raskin dropped and Tavernier and things like that, is the Raskin situation, for example, is interesting because his contract's running down. So do Rangers fall into the trap of a Kent and Morelos, or do they get rid now? And I think if a decent bid came in for any of those players that were dropped, Russell Martin would take it.
Well, of those two teams that we're talking about, and I think Hearts, as you can say, at home with the crowd, great, good win against Aberdeen. Rangers, contrast to Motherwell, at home, good win against Victoria Pilsen. The more sensible fans who've been over the course before say, listen, calm your jets, don't get above your station. Rangers still have a big hurdle to get past even after Victoria Pilsen, if they get past them, which I think they will do. But you've got to kind of curtail that. Sometimes the standard of opposition, sometimes it just all clicks into place on the night. I think there's great optimism, from a Hearts perspective. because I looked at their side and I think he's going to get a couple of more players in before the window closes. And I think equally so with Russell Martin, his team will change and become, I think, more competitive, that greater urgency he's looking for. I mean, I look at the Hearts side and I think to myself, well, Xander Clark was in goal because Gordon's obviously injured. Kent, Halkett, Finlay, Harry Milne, then Braga, Bosch, Grevnik, Devlin, Spittle, Shanklin and McEntee. And they had players on the bench that could come on and contribute
Wilsons,
as well.
yeah.
Forrest. So it'll be interesting to see what type of player he adds to it. But I really hope Tony Bloom may well just be a bit gung-ho with his optimism, but I really do hope that they are one of the teams that can emerge and take a few scalps along the way.
I think they will. I think that I think there was an element of excitement. I'm a football obsessive, as you know, and a new season's always like Christmas to me. But I watched Falkirk versus Dundee United. You know, it was wonderful, the sun and things like that, and the atmosphere there. You went. Many countries in the world, you know, would have, it's on live on the telly and it's a sellout. There's a great razzmatazz about it. I was interested in it, and a terrific match. Okay, it wasn't El Clasico in terms of technique, but it was a good football game that both teams try to play football. And I just thought, I think there's an excitement about this season. I think there's reasons to be optimistic in so many clubs. I think certainly the top six is going to be a battle. I think Hibs, Aberdeen and Hearts will all have ambitions. But there'll be other teams in the league. I think I've got a wee notion for Livingston. I think Livingston will be fine. I think Davy Martindale will tweak his tactics, and if he tweaks his tactics to be aggressive, as he showed against Kilmarnock when they were 2-0 down, they've got good players there. The wee boy Smith, Lewis Smith, he had a really bad injury when he was young, when he was at Hamilton, but I know Celtic and others were looking at him then, but he looks now back to what he was. He skinned the full-back at the weekend. They've got decent players at Livingston as well. Central defence, McGowan and Wilson. There's so many little stories there. I think we've got reasons to be optimistic. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. But the good thing is as well, we come from a nation where it rains quite a lot, and we try to find optimism and hope in even the darkest corners.
Of course.
You know, which is why we buy season tickets and moan at rank rotten football. You know, so we are the eternal optimists, even in the bleakest of days.
To an extent, it was always always remember that I went to a basketball game in Boston Celtics, Detroit Pistons, and everybody was talking about, oh, this is a real great rivalry, you know, watch yourself and all that. And of course, in the bar afterwards, all the fans were together sitting, and they were all watching the game, they were all talking and they were all laughing, and they went, no, this isn't Scottish football.
No. When's the punch up coming? Yeah, absolutely.
Thrown up.
The other thing was they were so glad to have been at the game, whereas if you were a Scottish football fan, if you go into the pub after the game and somebody says, oh, yeah, was that game? You know, you don't go, I was at the game and it was wonderful and I was on the kids' cam, you know. And they were firing T-shirts. I mean, I just meant, no, I was at that game.
Yeah, you know? Exactly. And I think that,
it's funny, I was speaking to fans on a Monday night when I was at Hearts, and I was speaking to fans before we go in, and I had loads of really young people, and they were, oh, Tony Bloom, it's amazing, fantastic, up, and I got this older guy, stopped and he went, we don't really do optimism. We really do optimism.
Yeah. In fact, Ali, if there's anything I can say to you, it chips away at you. You know, I remember, and I'm sure he won't mind me referencing him on this, and I hope I don't know, it depends on what way you want to take it. I always remember being a young journalist and running into Jerry McNee, and Jerry was forever the cynic on anything. Jerry at times could see a dark cloud on a sunny day, much like Keevans, right? The two of them, and it chipped away, and I'm young, enthusiastic, want to do millions of interviews, think the game's great. And then, you know, as you sit and you get to chat to Jerry, you think to yourself, God, is that what I'm going to turn into? Is that what I'm going to turn into in 20 years from now? And I don't know, some people might say, well, you know, you have your mono-face old bugger, but nevertheless, yeah, absolutely. You know, you do, it chips away at you, but forever the optimist in Scottish football. And of course, we've got lots that we always try and get in, which is topical, and I think it's only right and proper. We've done Rangers, Hearts, and the other one, which is a burning one, which is, I think, really, really good to debate. And we've been constantly debating it, but never quite coming up with the answer, although I think we're getting closer now. And I've pitched it in because it's such a topical documentary. You've alluded to basketball. Is this the last dance for Brendan Rodgers? And more now I think it is. But I think the next 3 weeks, Hugh, are going to be incredibly interesting to see where the focus of Celtic fans' assessment of it all is. Because Brendan Rodgers, if it is his last season, has got to engineer the narrative, control it. If he can go out on a high with his team winning, with all the Rangers chat and all the Rangers competition and anybody else who potentially could come as a third force, if he wins and replicates what he did in Europe, then he can go out with his head held high if he leaves at the end of the season. But the big question everybody is waiting on right now is, did you get what you asked for? Are you happy with the standard of player that you were offered by the board? Did you get them in, and did it all click into place good enough for you to get to where you need to be? Because they need to be in the group stages of the Champions League. And with these signings slowly coming in, I mean, Pusey's coming in, and there's I think the Liverpool boy, Stefan Bajcetic, is linked with a move to Celtic. But they want to see them in. And it's interesting what they're doing with the spending of it.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, need two wingers. And they need two wingers now. They can't go in, well, they might go into, but it'd be playing Maida as a winger's fine, you know, but you lose him at centre forward that way. But another wing, you're going to have to go for Yang or Forrest at the moment, and I would say that's not optimal for the Champions League. So you need wingers. Then to the first query is, I think this is his last year. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. I think if I was Celtic, to dampen down the PR on it, I would say to Brendan, can you just say, we'll draw up something, we'll make it a rolling contract. So that he can then say, he can kill it by saying, no, we've got a rolling contract, but it's mutually, can be killed by the other side.
Yeah.
That would at least, because all through the season, people are going to say, he signed yet, he signed yet, he signed every single week. It's going to, and after every bad result, it's going to go through the roof. So that would be one political way that I would get around
but
it.
The speeding train or the speeding bullet, whichever way you want to use the analogy on it, is quite simply 3 weeks from now, are you happy with what they've delivered for you? Because quite simply, you say wingers. I am looking at his team right now and I'm saying goals, because Adam Ida is not a £9 million player, and even if he's a project, I don't think Brendan's going to get whatever magic he works on players to make them better. I don't think he's going to get enough of a trick out of Ida to suggest he's going to score 30, 40 goals and score goals in big games that they need.
I think if he gets two wingers in, he'll play Maida back through the middle. I think Maida will be first choice, but I agree with you. I think...
Would you not concede he needs a striker?
I do think he needs another striker. But I think... I don't think Brendan will stay either. I completely agree with you. I think I wondered, I said exactly the same thing. I thought a rolling contract would be the ideal manoeuvre around it, because it lets it just takes the heat away from it, because that remains topical every single week to the point of exasperation on both sides. You have to ask it. As a journalist, you're going to have to ask it every single week. And there will be a growing frustration the longer that goes on and being asked about it repetitively. In terms of the squad, I think there is time. They've got 3 weeks. I think it can be, if you look at the kind of market that Celtic deal in and what you're going to go and spend, the players that you want have options. They have options. The advice just now will be sit tight and see where you're going laterally. You might get a better league, you might get a France, you might get a... So just sit, there's an offer in there from Scotland, just sit and wait. Weigh it up just now. So I think it is difficult.
I think you said that.
It is tough.
You said that last year on the show. I've said it. We've listened to that narrative coming out of Celtic Park. So everybody buys everybody buys into that, Alison. That's not the issue. The issue is,
you've got a man.
Are you happy with the calibre of player that you've been?
And also as well, I thought Brendan Rodgers' comments last week were very echoey of his last season. Last time around, that where there is a very public hint of the fact that I am not happy with what's going on and I'm about to bring it to the fore. In the comments that I'm making, I'm bringing it to the fore. I think that's a bigger problem than what the actual recruitment is. Yeah. If you look at the actual, there is still time to strengthen that squad between now and the end of the window. Last season, Celtic were the biggest net spenders in Europe. The end result is that they moved up a couple of places in the Champions League. They brought in money. That was the biggest return that they got for the money that they spent. So if you're sitting now on the board and you're saying you get a manager that may not be here in a year's time, you might not have Champions League football across the next couple of seasons because getting into that is going to be fairly fraught. How much do you want to commit to X amount on salary expectation? I think there's loads of things.
Well, I don't buy that because I think every year there's an excuse. Every year there's a legitimate reason not to do something. And I don't buy into what you're saying. What I think is the cold light of day in 3 weeks' time, Hugh. And it's nothing to do with, it's everything to do with when the Celtic PR machine and their board moan about people being critical of them. Some of the things that they don't hear is the positivity around what Brendan achieved. Okay, they lost the Scottish Cup to Aberdeen. But what he did deliver, and I think a lot of people mention it on a regular basis, he delivered one of the best performances in the Allianz Arena that we've all seen. There was a slight caveat of criticism, which is, by the way, the board derailed you by selling your top striker and not replacing him, which I thought might have given them the ultimate result in Germany that night, if they had another striker, another option from the bench. This time around, Celtic fans are not going to buy this whole, he's going, we're not going to spend. He's laid down the gauntlet to them. He's said, by the way, I want a calibre of player that allows me as a manager to take it and do what the remit was. And the remit, we're all aware from coming back, is it's not really to win the Scottish Premiership. We're going to do that anyway because Rangers were in turmoil still. A board that wasn't quite settled, a strategy that was not in place, a recruitment policy that was all over the place. So they're going to win the league. So there's that gamble. But the big thing that he was brought back for was, can you maybe get not only group stages, could you get Celtic out of the group stages, maybe a one-off game? Well, he achieved that. And some of the football they played was magnificent. And I think they got the credit. They got the credit they deserved. He's now said, well, I might stay. We know that he's going to be off-ski. But if you want me, to keep taking Celtic forward, give me the players.
Yeah, but there's always a but. There's always a but. I'm just wondering now what is the situation? What is the process here? Who's making the decisions? Who's deciding what they're going to buy and who they're going to buy? And if you're looking at it at the moment, what did Celtic spend? Celtic spent 30 million last summer, maybe a bit more on players, all of whom were on the bench apart from Ida on Saturday. Bernardo was on the bench, Trusty on the bench, Engels on the bench. So Ida started up front. So you're looking at that. Is there a reluctance to go with Brendan's judgment? Is there a reluctance to spend a lot of money for a variety of reasons, like Champions League, what the manager might be away anyway? But I just don't know. At one point, I could have a handle on things at Celtic because it was a more open Celtic, and at the moment it's to me at least. I don't know about other journalists, but to me, it's closed shop. Yes. I've got no insight to what's happening there. For example, I would love to know, for example, what happened with Friesgarden, where Brendan at Motherwell was seemed sure there was going to be a player coming in for Kyogo. It didn't. I would wonder at the moment with wingers, okay, wingers will hurt. Alison's right, there'll be other options, but I think Rangers got 2 wingers in that Celtic would have been quite happy with Antman and Gassama. It didn't get them.
That point that you made, though, Hugh, is exactly where Celtic want to be, which is closed shop and controlling the narrative and blocking off any insight. That's exactly where they want to be. They've got the grand plan of 10 years ago right down to a T now, all blocked out, and basically the only thing that comes out is, what I call the patsies of people who are doing Celtic podcasts, buying every load of crap that comes out. They've got that the way they want it. But the one thing is, now, quite simply, is a lot of fans are not fooled by it. They're looking and saying, okay, you've blocked off the press, there are no leaks here and there, they're following this particular strategy, but the eyes of the fans are on the park. And with Brendan in the 3 weeks, and I think it's only this issue, is basically in the 3 weeks, regardless of how they try and control the PR machine, it's a difficult market, players have got options, do we want to back him in his last year? Bollocks. He's got 3 weeks, he's already said, we can all read between the lines, we know Brendan's rhetoric. Are you going to give him the calibre of player he wants? And in 3 weeks' time, any journalist worth their salt sits in that press conference and says, Brendan, are you happy with the calibre of player you've got? And if he says yes, then on you go for the final season. On you go, and if you want to go or you want to stay because they're back to you, great. You've told us, because it's in press conferences. But if he says no, I would have liked more, you know where we're going.
If he says no, he shouldn't be there. He should be out the door that day. Seriously. And if you say that about your board on that day, the board didn't back me, I would say, well, fine, go. The calibre of player that Brendan wants as well is a difficult one, because if you look at what Brendan has signed and the ones that he signed, he always talks about EPL, and he's now talking about good level championship. Is there a mood there for Celtic to go for EPL? I don't think they would get an EPL player.
No, but I think Celtic's board, on the flip side of this is where balance comes in. I think Celtic's board have to be complimented on the signing of Jahmai Simpson-Pusey. Because if you don't want to spend tens and 11 millions, then the loan deal that you get for somebody, sometimes they get a loan deal with an option to buy because they can get a look at them. But I think what they've done there deserves credit, because it's a young centre-back who can play football, can take it out from the back, and he will get regular football, certainly easy.
That's the key, though. Will he get, I mean,
if it's regular domestic football.
Well, if it's Brendan's signing, he will, but other signings that they had, like Lager Bielke and Naroki, didn't. Now, I know there's been huge criticism about Lager Bielke, but I struggle to find what Naroki did wrong. I really do.
Yeah.
See, if somebody said to me, why is Naroki been given chances when Scales has, for example? I'm not slaughtering Scales, but I'm just saying, Scales has been given chances after big errors.
When he was brought in.
Big errors.
This is the background of what you call a closed shop.
Well, you don't know who's signing and who's players. I mean, we've had this already. We talk about Celtic needing a number 9. Celtic have brought in since January three distinctive number 9s since January. 3 number 9s have brought in since January. Brought back Kenny from loan. They brought Shin in. And they brought the boy from Fulham. 3 centre forwards.
Yes.
But the immediate answer is, but many of them is going to start. So that shows you it's a strategy.
Yeah.
For example, do Celtic need another centre forward? In one way, absolutely not, because there's 5 at the club.
Yes.
There's 5 at the club. Do they need a backup centre forward? Absolutely yes. And that's the nub of the argument.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's a great 3 weeks coming up, isn't it?
Indeed.
which is the joy of it all. And I'm sure Brendan will give us those little lines that we can all read between as the next 3 weeks.
You're not going to need your glasses, I don't
No,
think.
absolutely. Listen, it's been an absolute joy as ever. That's what the Journos is all about. Great to have Hugh back with us for season number 14, Hugh, which is absolutely incredible.
Just impact sub.
Absolutely, you've been far from an impact sub. You've been a kind of I liken you to a kind of a Frank Soze or Pat Stanton signing. You know, one of those guys who just shows up at the back and gives people a sense of sensibility. So Ali's a permanent signing. She was a loan option to buy, and then we decided to buy her. You see how it all worked out, Ali? So from everybody on the Journos, don't forget, if you subscribe to our premium service, you'll get lots of additional content, early access to our programming, and prizes and competitions galore, which will all become abundant as the season unfolds. So thank you for signing up and backing us with our premium service. And if you want to subscribe to PLZ Soccer, don't forget the football show is free 5 days a week, and our reporters are out interviewing managers and players non-stop across social media. From everyone here, thanks for watching and listening.